Welcome to this episode of From Dirt We Grow. I'm your host, Stephanie Allen, formerly Stephanie Kendall, just to avoid any confusion. I welcome you to this episode where we have another special guest. I am here with Jeff Pixley running for Oklahoma's 4th District. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you for the invitation. I really enjoyed being here.
Yeah, so first things first, I gotta ask you, are we gonna get to midterms?
Yeah, I have no doubt we're going to get to midterms, and the reason I have confidence is individual states run their own elections, and it would be despite there being plenty of governors and secretaries of state who might be worried about the outcome of the midterms. Also think that all of them care about doing their jobs right. Even if I disagree with them politically, they want to do their jobs, and if your job is to pull off an election, you're going to want to do an election. So I think we'll get there. Might if there's any hiccup, it might be an intent to drive down voter participation with nonsense, but that's kind of been going on for a long time anyway. So we just have to be prepared for that. But I'm confident we're going to have the elections in November.
Okay, good. I just had to get that question out there first. Now tell us who you are, why you're running.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. You bet. So I'm a 53-year-old guy from originally from California. Actually, I didn't grow up here in Oklahoma. My folks were Air Force veterans, and they settled in California. And I was raised in a house that really valued and honored military service. My parents had served, their parents had served. So what I tell folks is I basically grew up in a museum to them and to their parents and their service to the country. So early in my life, I knew that the military service was probably where I was headed. And then when I was pretty young, I saw my first fighter airplane fly in an air show or something, and I'm like, "Wow, that looks pretty cool." My dad said, "Well, you can do that if you want." So I made that my dream. Like a lot of kids, you grow up with want to be a baseball star or a movie star. I want to be a fighter pilot. So I decided early on I want to be a fighter pilot. And then when I finished high school, I wasn't quite ready for college, so I enlisted in the Air Force, and I'm glad I did because it gave me a chance to grow up a significant amount and start my family. So by the time I went to college here in Oklahoma, I was much better prepared to be successful in college. And after getting commissioned as lieutenant, I went off to pilot training and ended up flying F-16s, which was at the time that happened, I was kind of like mission accomplished. My life's complete. But as often happens in life, the every new day a new opportunity, and the Air Force was so good to me and giving me interesting assignments and opportunities outside of flying. And I went from job to job and made my way up the ranks, and eventually ended up at back at here in Oklahoma at the University of Oklahoma as the commander of the unit that I had been a cadet in back in college, which is just a really really cool job because it's one of those jobs where you get to take your experience and background and passion and pour it into other people to prepare them to be young leaders. So I absolutely would love the job. I was supposed to do it for 3 years, and then a year and a half into it, in February of 2025, so just over a year ago now, I woke up one Saturday morning and saw the news that the president had fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He had fired the admiral that ran the Navy, and he had fired, to me, most alarmingly, he had fired all the lawyers that make sure that the orders that come down from high levels in the DoD are
Mm.
constitutional and proper. And when I read that news, I realized I was at a crossroads, that my oath of office might now, for the first time in 35 years, be at odds with the orders that were coming down to me. So I decided to retire. And within a few weeks of that decision, I realized that my path in retirement would be in public office, so I can continue to uphold my oath of office just in civilian clothes.
35 years, that's a long time. And you are going to retire this year?
Yeah, the original plan would have had me retiring in the summer of 2026, and some might say, well, you could have held out for another year. That would have meant about $300 more a month in my retirement pay. But now looking back, the timing couldn't have been better. So I actually retired on September 1st of 2025, and the next day we started bombing boats in Venezuelan waters. And
Mm,
so I,
mhm.
I I I got out just before things got really bad, and I predicted it back in February when I decided to retire. I'd predicted things were going to get bad, but I wildly underestimated how bad they would get, and that I'm sitting here today, scrolling through news of an ongoing regional war in Iran that didn't have to happen is
Mm.
it just reinforces I made a great decision to leave. And I think it more than ever, it means that people like me, especially veterans, need to get into the halls of Congress to stop nonsense like this from happening.
You left your 35-year career to run to help the people and stop this regime.
Absolutely. So
Wow.
if you hear me on the campaign trail, when people ask me, so what are your priorities? The first one I always mention is what I call restoring constitutional balance, and that's making sure that we have three co-equal branches of government with real oversight and checks and balances between them. They're wildly out of balance, and Congress needs to retake that. So when I get to Congress, we're going to reassert our authority as the first article branch, and make sure that no one person or no one branch of government can run the country down a path that the people don't want.
What are some of your policies? Tell us what you're running for.
Yeah, so the first one I just mentioned about restoring constitutional balance, that's about oversight and accountability. The second one is about the economy, giving every American a fair shot. We have a broken economy that favors the extremely wealthy and corporations and is leaving the working people of America behind. It's intentionally turned into what effectively feels like a subscription economy, where everything you do comes at a cost, and the goal of the economy is to take every penny away from you to keep you on the ragged edge of survival. Uh,
Mhm.
we can't sustain that. It's not how our country's supposed to be. So on the economic front, there's a couple key provisions, key things that I'm going to fight for. Number one is to take away the tariffs that President Trump has imposed on the country. Those are amount to really a national sales tax, which has been a Republican dream for a long time that kept getting shot down because it's a terrible idea and it's very regressive. They've imposed out on us, and although there's some losses in the courts, the president seems intent on keeping them going. So we have to put that money back in the pockets of Americans. We need to increase the national minimum wage. It hasn't gone up in a long time, and it needs to be adjusted to make it a livable wage. I'm a believer that if you work a full time job, you should be able to put a roof over your head and put food on your table and pay for healthcare. And if you can't do that, then we're not paying you enough. Speaking of healthcare, I'm an advocate for a national single payer healthcare system, and the numbers are obvious. That this has been analyzed left and right. It's expensive, yes, but it's actually be less expensive than what we're doing right now,
Mhm.
with better health, better outcomes, better quality of life, and more options for folks. And there are folks out there who hear that, and they recoil like, I don't want the government in my healthcare. I speak from 35 years of experience in the military where I had government provided healthcare, and guess what? It was phenomenal.
Mhm.
It not only was it great care, but it didn't cost me a thing, and it was the decisions about my health were made between me and my doctor, and it wasn't like the government coming and tell me what kind of care I deserved. I was very well taken care of. And some
Mhm.
people think when they think of military healthcare that that's provided as like a reward for our sacrifice in being in the military. But that's not actually the case. The reality is they provide me great health care because if I'm not healthy, I can't do the mission. I can't be flying my airplane. And if my kids or my wife are not healthy, I can't focus on the mission. And if we have medical debt, then I can't focus, and B, I become a security threat. And if they're not healthy, they can't be full participants in the military community and do the things they need to do to keep it thriving and connected. Well, all those things I just said are true in the civilian world as well. So if we take care of people, stop medical debt from accumulating, allow people to get care as soon as they need it, not when it's an emergency, it's less expensive. It has better health outcomes. It will make people more productive. It'll drive down absenteeism in work, drive down absenteeism in schools. It's a net positive for our country. And anybody who doesn't know that is not looking. Most civilized countries have this.
What could we improve on as far as the military, the vets getting their care easier?
That's a great question, and well, I'm lucky as well. Oklahoma City has a pretty sizable VA medical center that I have access to. There's a satellite clinic here in my town in Normans that I have quick access to. But I also don't have giant medical needs. Although I'm disabled, I don't have any long term needs that need constant attention by the VA. my concern is that elsewhere in Oklahoma, in rural areas, because Oklahoma has a lot of rural areas, access to VA healthcare is limited, and with the recent Doge cuts to VA, and ongoing funding issues with VA, the healthcare being offered outside of Oklahoma City is diminishing, and there are people that have to travel further or wait longer for care. The other thing that my criticism of the VA system, and it's related to Doge as well, is when I retired, I went through the somewhat painful, but kind of predictably painful, and if you've been in the military as long as I was used to bureaucracy,
Mhm.
process of applying for my filing my claim, my VA disability claim,
Mhm.
and I had about 6 months lead time to make that work, and when I first filled out my application and sent it to the VA reps at the nearby Air Force Base, there were two VA employees that was their full time job was to take care of us, and I sent my application in to the person I was told to, and I got an out of office reply. It said, "I have taken the off ramp, the kind of the like early retirement that Doge offered. So send your stuff to my partner in crime." So I said, "Okay." I sent my stuff to that guy, and he said, "Okay, I'll take care of you." And then about 2 weeks later, I get an email, a mass email from that guy saying, "I am overwhelmed. I can't take care of you. So tough. You're on your own." And I had to end up filing my claim with the help of
What?
a veteran services organization, volunteer organization in town. Now, luckily, that was there for me, and I wasn't in dire straits,
Mm.
and it worked out for me. But I had time. I had a full time, colonel's income at the time. If a 53-year-old college educated colonel with all the time in the world and plenty of money to spare struggles to get through the process, imagine what it's like for an E3 who got medically discharged and is due veterans care and doesn't have all those benefits coming toward him. And
Oh, you're talking about me.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's exactly my fear, is that if it was hard for me, I can only imagine what it's like for someone else. So I think we really, really need to do a better job of making it easy, making it rapid, and ensuring that as people hit roadblocks, they are immediately helped and given assistance.
I see that the doctors, the staff is being affected. Like there's not enough doctors, and my doctor changes like every year at least.
Mhm.
That's a big problem I see. Are you running as a third? What are you running as?
I'm a
Your
Democrat. It's funny, and if you know anything about Oklahoma politics, you know that this is a red state. But our real issues are we're a low voter turnout state, but typically it's a red state. And given my background, a lot of people ask me like, "Well, you don't seem like a Democrat." Well, my answer to that is, well, I'm a public servant whose values align with the Democratic Party's values. If you look at the platform of
Mhm.
the Democratic Party, that matches my values. And although it's tempting these days to declare independence from the party. So I'm not a fan of the two party system. I got to be honest with you. I
Me
think it's
either.
destructive.
Mhm.
But as a newcomer to politics with no connections in the political world, because as you know, on active duty, you're not political. I was never
Mhm.
political while I was on
Yeah,
active duty.
me either.
um, Launching a already long shot bid to unseat an entrenched politician as an independent would have been essentially a recipe for disaster. So, what I tell folks is, I'm in the party, but I'm not of the party. There's nobody in Washington D.C. or in the DNC that's pulling my strings or telling me what to do. They're not giving me any advice, and they're certainly not giving me any money. But I share their values, and I think if I can make a reality those things that are listed on the platform of our party in Oklahoma, then I'll be doing some real good for all of Oklahomans, including Republicans who may not know it, but the Democratic principles and Democratic platform items are good for them and their families and their future.
Yeah, I mean, we don't trust the Democrats anymore either. A lot of us, the
Sure.
smart ones.
Yeah, I mean,
Honestly, I
there's
mean,
good reason. There's good reason because I
yeah.
think they've been walked away from, and we've been tricked into believing that the corporate party, I guess is a better way to put it,
Hmm.
is on our side. But they answer to the same people that are pulling the strings across the political spectrum, and that my issue is. And this really goes back to money in politics. I think we could fix it
Yes.
tomorrow if we overturn Citizens United and get money out of politics. Then we'd be free. All politicians and the parties would be free to chase their values and make the world a better place without worrying about satisfying their rich donors, which really is I think it's the root of our main political problems in our country today.
So that's absolutely where I stand with that. I want to defund politics. So to be clear, you are not running with any corporate backed money,
Nope.
no PAC funding, nothing like
Correct.
that.
No,
Okay.
no corporate money, no foreign influence money. I can't rule out that I would never accept money from a PAC, but it would have to be total transparency into where their money comes from. Because some people do, basically bundle from causes. That, if there are people out there, if there's a PAC that's set up to support candidates who want healthcare, if they're getting money from grassroots, from regular people, I could probably get behind taking a contribution
Okay.
from them. But if they're being funded by corporations or being funded by foreign influence money, I don't want it.
Yeah, I
I don't
mean
want no
it's
part of that.
simple. If you're running corporate backed, you obviously are working for the corporations and not
That's
for the
right.
people. So
Oh, and I've had people tell me like, "Oh, you're crazy. Don't do that. Uh, just publicly say that, an ironclad. I will make my own choices. They're not controlling my vote." But that's of course, I would never let someone control my vote. That's not the problem. The problem
mhm.
is if people wonder why you're voting a certain way, you've already lost. So the mere appearance of corruption is something we have to avoid at all costs. And so I'm not taking any money, even though I would never let a corporation decide my vote. The average voter already has they're pretty suspicious of politicians, so they're not going to believe me if I say that. So I can never take a corporate dime and look at them in the eyes.
Have you run into any roadblocks as far as the rules that are in place for the people that are not, the corporate backed candidates? What roadblocks have you come across as far as, well, you got to have so many of this and so much of this?
Yeah, the main roadblock for me is, well, one is tied to what I've already mentioned about coming out of nowhere. So I had zero name recognition. So I started from, total anonymity really on September 1st. So the barriers to entry to politics are fairly high, and early name recognition equals, fundraising potential. That's the main issue for me is attention and fundraising. And that ties to back to the money being the problem in politics. My kind of naive perception of politics before I was in politics was that endorsements and financial backing from individual donors, even small dollar individual donors, was directly tied to someone's policy positions and attractiveness as a candidate. I couldn't have been more wrong. It is 100% about how much money you have in the bank and whether or not you have a primary. The first question people ask me is almost never about my policy positions when I'm talking about fundraising. They ask me how much I've already raised and ask me if I'm in a primary. Because if I don't have much money, they're like, "Oh, you must suck because you don't have any money, so I'm not going to give you any money," which is a self fulfilling prophecy. And they ask if you have a primary because they're people that don't want to pick a side. They're afraid to pick the loser. So instead of asking me what my positions are, or evaluating me as a better candidate, very frustrating. So the barriers to entry are those kind of dumb things tied to money, and there's FEC rules on everything. But I have to be honest, actually, the Federal Election Commission website is pretty awesome. And if you want to follow the rules, you just have to go to their website and basically Google what's the rule. And if you don't understand it, you can just literally call a number and they'll help you.
Is there anything specific to Oklahoma? Your District 4?
Yep, Congressional District 4, which has a couple military bases on it. It's about 60% suburban and then about 33% rural. So farms, oil fields, ranchers, and so it's a healthy mix of different things that matter. We have industry, arts, research, science, all here in Oklahoma. So it's a really cool mixed bag of things that people care about here. Plus oil, and natural gas. That's a significant part of our culture and our economy. But what Oklahoma needs is some of the stuff I already talked about. The affordability is tough here. The housing market's tough here. Insurance is expensive here. The schools are expensive. There's some state politics stuff that are really rough here. Oklahoma's last in or 50th among 50th out of 51 for schools. So we have some struggles, but what I'm focused on for Oklahomans is affordability, taking care of the economy. I'm also a firm believer in national defense, and although I think this thing in Iran is the wrong thing to do, and we shouldn't have done it. I believe in a national defense, but it needs to be right sized, and that certainly doesn't need a $1.5 trillion budget. It's insane.
Absolutely.
Golden Dome is never going to happen. Scientifically, it can't work. It's a giant. That's just a well to pour gold bars down for somebody else to benefit from. So I'm a believer in a credible national defense, but it needs to be something we can defend, and we need to be able to look in the eyes of American people and say, when we're paying for this, but we're not paying for this other thing, and it should be they should understand that trade off. But I'm also a firm believer that we need to rebuild our credibility on the world stage. The State Department needs to be out there preventing conflict by increasing our partnerships, by improving our relationships, and improving our status on the world stage. But I fear that we were in a hole already back in September when I launched my campaign, and we've been digging ever since. It's got worse in the last 2 weeks. And the last thing, that this is not necessarily, I'm a one of the hills I will die on is, every human being deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. And I will fight for marginalized communities and make sure they're not marginalized, and make sure that everybody gets equal protection under the law and access to due process. And I'm not going to let someone fall through the cracks. It's just not. It's not where my heart is. And we're better than that. We ought to be better than that.
Amen. We don't leave anybody behind, right?
That's right. The longer term thing that really Oklahomans need to be worried about, and this is where, I'll have to tread lightly when I'm talking to some folks, but it's a fact. The truth is, if we don't take care of our planet, there is going to be farmland in Oklahoma that's no longer farmable in 50 or 100 years.
Mhm.
And we know that. Scientifically, we know that. So if we do nothing about that now, our grandchildren and great grandchildren will be rightly angry at us for not taking action when we had a chance to do so. So we really have to be smart about preserving these farmlands and giving future generations of farmers a state that they can actually produce on and continue their very proud culture and tradition of farming the land and raising cattle on this land, and enjoying the land. And I haven't even mentioned this, but there are 39 Native American tribes in the state of Oklahoma. Taking care of this state and this land and this earth is a moral obligation
Mm.
that we must uphold, because it's not property to our Native American brothers and sisters. It's part of their family and it's part of their culture.
Yeah, that's a great point that is just we don't really talk about because we're so worried about everything else that's going on. But what do you think about, is it feasible? What if we cut out the middleman as far as, or for at least partly the grocery stores, and what if we can just get it straight from the farm? Like,
Yeah, well, there's certainly a model for that. It's harder when you're growing so much of one thing that there's not a nearby local market that can absorb everything that you create. So there's almost always going to be a distribution network, and which is going to necessarily create middlemen who are experts at moving that around and doing all those things. But I do think the model for smaller farms, that I mean, this goes back to that consolidation is not unique to the top of the chain. There's a lot of how many family farms exist in our country has dwindled year by year, because like many things, I'm using air quotes here, perfection of the business means inefficiencies are eliminated to drive profit up. And sometimes that means that people are run out of business. Well, if you are farming 1,000 acres, it's if you can pull it off, the easiest thing to do is farm 1,000 acres of a single crop, right? And all those things are simplified. But I can imagine a world where it's smaller markets and direct to consumer. That's something that's attractive, and people certainly like the idea of that. I do, and I'd rather shop at a farmer's market than in a supermarket any day of the week.
we talked about trust a little bit. Obviously, we don't have much left for politicians or politics in general. Why should we trust you?
That's a great question, and I've had to answer that several times the campaign trail, because people are very suspicious of
Mhm.
politicians. It is a leap of faith to vote for someone. It's certainly a leap of faith to back someone financially in a campaign. My answer to that is, one, how can I convince someone I'm trustworthy? I'll begin by telling them that, and I'll tell you that I'm a what you see is what you get kind of guy. And if someone asks me a question, I'm going to give them an honest answer, but I'm not going to change my answer depending on who I'm talking to. So I'm going to tell you the truth. And if you don't like the answer, then you'll at least know where I stand. And if you decide not to vote for me, then you have at least arrived at that decision honestly. So that's step one, and you have to have integrity in your conversations and your interactions with people. I think as a public servant, that's a prerequisite. You have to do that. The other thing I would say to folks is they may not know it, but they already have trusted me. They just didn't know it. They didn't know my name. But, since I was young in the Air Force and my job was building bombs, and when I was flying my F-16, with live missiles protecting President Bush's ranch in Texas, my job was to shoot down a terrorist airplane that might be coming to take out our president back in, in the early 2000s. I was a nuclear certified pilot. I worked for Air Force One. I was the commander of Air Force basic training down at Lackland Air Force Base, where I had 4,000 brand new people in the Air Force under my charge and almost 1,000 people on my staff. And our job was to mold and take care of these young people in a mission that cannot fail. And in all those jobs, uh, even though I was never perfect in my job, every day I acted with integrity and I made the hard calls, even when I knew it'd be unpopular. And, as a commander, I've been a commander 3 times. And command is where I got most of my gray hair. And that comes from, there's lots of ways to do command. And there's always opportunities to do the easy thing or do the right thing. And over my career, I think I always did the right thing. And when I got something wrong, I was willing to admit I was wrong and then got better for it. So I think a track record like mine, with a variety of jobs at important levels, doing really important work for the Air Force, is a an indication of how I'll behave when I get to into office. And I'll wrap this part up by saying maybe the other indication for folks is helping them understand I'm not taking this job because I want to be in Congress, for a career in politics. I'm not doing it because I need the $174,000 paycheck. I'm a retired colonel. I'm not rich, but I do all right. I don't need a job. I can live on my retirement. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not doing it for fame. And I'm certainly not doing it because I was hoping to get a great reputation. The truth is, I will probably have at least in the short term, have a worse reputation than I would have had if I just stayed anonymous and retired silently because I had this great resume. You can Google my bio. And now I'm opening myself up to being beaten down by the people on the other side of the aisle who are pretty ruthless and relentless and will throw mud at me and try and undermine my credibility and make me seem like some kind of crazy, woke monster. The reason I'm doing this is because when I was 17, I raised my hand and took an oath, and I meant it. And intend to fulfill that oath in every way I can. And this is how I'm going to do it.
So, where can people find you? You got a website or something, or
Absolutely. If they go to pixleyforcongress.com, that's Pixleyfor Congress.com, all one word, or just Google Jeff Pixley. I'm very Googleable because I was had some high profile jobs before I left the Air Force. So it's all out there. They can check me out on all the socials except X. I'm not there. And if, I'm sure the folks that are listening to this, many of them or most of them maybe aren't in Oklahoma and they might be asking themselves, why do I care about Oklahoma politics?
Mhm.
Well, because the guy I'm going to replace has been in Congress for 20, going on 23 years, and he's causing harm across the country by his terrible policies, by blindly following the president as he takes us into war and does the tariffs and all the other crazy. So if you're in Minnesota or Wisconsin or California or Miami, you are adversely impacted by it. So you should care. And if you can, I'd love for people to contribute to my campaign to help me stay afloat because I'm not taking corporate money. But if someone doesn't have the means to do that, I can understand that. Spreading the word matters too, and saying, "Hey, this is what politics should sound like." That kind of word of mouth increases my reach and gives me the opportunity to engage with other folks. And if that is helpful to drive my fundraising, great. If it drives up votes, that's great. But the other thing is, I think leadership matters in politics. And we need more people out there who are not afraid to speak out against the two party system, who aren't afraid to speak out against
Mhm.
corporate politics and money in politics. And even if someone is not going to contribute to my campaign and can't vote for me, if they hear this and think that's what it should sound like, well, then they know what to look for in a politician in their area who they can contribute to. Or maybe even better yet, they say, you know what, I can run too. I can run to, and they can throw their hat in the ring at some level for office. Maybe not Congress, but anywhere else. Is We need leaders who are not afraid to be passionate and to serve with integrity at all levels.
Absolutely. You said you have donations. Where is it? Is it Cash App or is it? Or it's on your
Act
website,
Blue,
probably,
yeah, it's
right?
on my yeah, there's Act Blue is how we do our fundraising. So there's a way to contribute on our website,
Okay.
just by clicking on via Act Blue. It's fairly simple, and like I said, this is we're never going to outraise Tom Cole. He has unlimited money, and he takes money from all kinds of sources that I would never touch.
Mm.
But I believe we'll outwork him. And I think this is the 2026. He's never been weaker, and the country's never been more ready for leadership like I'm offering. So I'm hopeful that we can, at on a budget, still make a real difference here.
So another way we can help these candidates is go out there, find their social media, and share it, like it, comment. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. Jeff Pixley for Congress, Oklahoma, District 4. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here and for running. We
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Is there anything else you need to let the people know?
Get out there and vote.
Thank you for being here, Jeff. Thank you for being here, audience, and the best of luck to you. I really honestly wish you the best of luck and hope to see you in there.
Thank you, and thanks for the work you're doing. I've been watching your stuff on TikTok. I'm
Oh,
really enjoying it. You're doing great work.
thank you so much. I so appreciate that. We will see you next week right here on From Dirt We Grow.